Hi, everyone. This is Heather Hodges. I'm an organizational psychologist. Welcome to my show. This is the place where we say I'm in to creativity, bold thinking, transformational growth, and meaningful conversations. The Enneagram is a map that shows us 9 different personality types, 9 different ways of seeing and being in the world. It's like having 9 different pairs of glasses with 9 different lenses and perspectives. Now, the Enneagram takes its name from the Greek words for 9, Ennea, and figure or drawing, grammos. And ironically, the term personality is derived from the Greek word for mask or persona. So the Enneagram is a way of understanding how people think, feel, and behave based on their unique personalities and motivations. Now, we each naturally gravitate towards one of these 9 different personality types. And I first heard about the Enneagram back in 1997 when my husband and I moved from Abilene, Texas to Bellingham, Washington. And a new friend up there, he gave me an Enneagram book by Helen Palmer. And I took one look at the cover of that book and I tossed it in a drawer. I thought it must be hocus pocus, whatever. It didn't sit right with me. Now, fast forward to 2015, when my husband, Wade, went to a conference in Greenwich Village with a group of pastors and clergy. And so for him, the single most impactful part of that trip was a seminar on the Enneagram taught by Suzanne Stabile and Ian Cron. And when I picked Wade up from the airport after the trip, we stayed up until the wee hours of the morning talking about our relationship and the Enneagram. And it was incredibly eye-opening. And we had been married over 15 years at that time, but I don't think we really understood each other fully until we had the Enneagram. It's been a gift in my life, and I hope it will be a gift for you too. The Enneagram has helped me be a better wife, a better mom, a better friend, a better coworker and coach and trainer and leader. Now, it's just a tool like any other tool, but I think it's the best one that we have to help you grow your self-awareness, your emotional intelligence, and your leadership. So when I first heard about the Enneagram, not only did I think it was hocus pocus pseudoscience, I objected to there being only 9 personalities in a world of, 8 billion people? Now, today I have an entirely different perspective. So instead of thinking of the 9 numbers as static or fixed, I imagine each Enneagram type as a color. So for example, we could say Enneagram 4s are blue, but there are an infinite number of shades and tones and hues and tints of blue. So the number of blues in the spectrum are how many types of Enneagram 4s there are in the world. So when you've known one Enneagram 4, you only know one Enneagram 4. That's why it's so hard to discern your own Enneagram number, much less anybody else's. Now, when my husband and I first learned the Enneagram, we would discuss our numbers and we talked about our friends and how their numbers showed up and played out in relationships. And our sons were little at the time, and so they thought that we were ranking people based on their number and judging them. Now, in reality, no number is inherently better than the others. So that's why thinking of them as shades of color might be helpful. Now, some individuals like to be known, and others prefer to remain a mystery, and I get that. I think we all have some or large aversion to being labeled or stereotyped. And I've heard people to object to being put in the box by the Enneagram. I totally understand. I promise the Enneagram will not put you in a box. It will simply show you the box you're already in and how to get out of it. So I learned the Enneagram through the narrative tradition from Suzanne Stabile, who was my Enneagram mentor and teacher. And then I continued my training with integrative Enneagram solutions. Now, there are several different ways that you can discover your Enneagram number. You can go to a seminar or listen or read to books and work to identify your type. Now, that's how I learned my number. The other way that you can learn your number is to take the IEQ-9 assessment, which offers a 95% accuracy in typing. Now, there is a cost associated with that assessment, and it will give you a multi-page report with development exercises and growth pathways. And there are other online tests and assessments which are not as accurate, but I am a certified facilitator of the IEQ-9, and I can recommend it highly to you. So if you want to take it, the IEQ-9, please go to my website at hodgesgroupintl.com, and you can find a link. So whichever option you choose to discover your number, here are 6 things to keep in mind when you are working with the Enneagram. First of all, number 1, we all have every number in us. So we can adopt the characteristics of each of the 9 types, but there will be one number that just fits you better. That number will just be truer to how you habitually see and respond to the world. Now, number 2, your Enneagram number is based on your motivation. It's not based on your behavior. So you are the only person who can discern your number without an empirically validated assessment like the IEQ-9. It's tempting, so tempting, to want to guess each other's numbers or your boss's or your mother-in-law or your spouse's number. But they are the only one who can truly discern their number. Remember, the first rule of Fight Club, wait, that's a different movie. The first rule of Enneagram is work on yourself, not your neighbor. And believe me, you'll have enough to do on your own. At least that's been my experience. Besides, you will probably guess wrong anyway. When Wade came home from that 2-day Enneagram seminar, he thought I was a completely different number than I actually am. Like my number doesn't even touch the number that he thought I was. So never try to guess the type of another person. Okay, number 3. You may feel embarrassed or even offended, and that's okay. So one of the ways some people know their number is that they feel embarrassed or offended or uncomfortable or sad when they hear it taught. Some people even cry. I cried. And I think learning our Enneagram number can be a lot like the stages of grief. So when we first learn our number, we kind of go through this cycle of like shock and then anger and denial and then depression. And then we finally go through acceptance and integration. But remember, the truth will set you free. But first, it will make you miserable. And I think it's easy to get down on ourselves when we first learn the Enneagram because as humans, we tend to focus on the negative aspects of our personality or our Enneagram number. And that's because we usually know ourselves by what we get wrong more than we know ourselves by what we get right. But I encourage you to just observe yourself non-judgmentally. The Enneagram, it's supposed to help us be more compassionate, and that includes being more compassionate to ourselves. Okay, number 4, you can be functioning high, average, or low in your number. So our goal as leaders is to be in that average to high range most of the time. But we can slip into the low range sometimes. And I call it misbehaving. And when I misbehave in my number, it's ugly. And when you misbehave in your number, it's ugly as well. So when you're misbehaving in your number, you're kind of functioning in that low range, and we want to try to reduce those occurrences. Now, one thing I want to note is that the Enneagram, it does not speak to pathology or mental illness. You'll need a therapist and the DSM for that. All right, number 5. best thing about you is also the worst thing about you. Your greatest strength and your greatest weakness are two sides of the same coin. So the best thing that you have to offer the world is also the worst thing you have to offer when you're operating in the low range of your number. So remember that too much of a good thing is usually bad. So when we dial up our gifts too high, they become a curse. So we need to learn to use our gifts instead of being used by our gifts. And number 6, our goal is to become self-aware and to be mature and transformed so that we can live a wholehearted, creative, abundant, useful life in the world. Now, based on your Enneagram number, you have developed a set of patterned, predictable ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. So this is your personality. And to become mature and transformed and self-aware, we must understand our personalities and where and how we misbehave in our numbers or our personalities so that we can begin the work of a lifetime to grow towards maturity. Now, each Enneagram number has a basic need and a core fear. And the basic needs and the desires of each Enneagram number, it's closely tied to their motivation for behavior. It is the psychological drive that shapes the thoughts and the feelings and the actions of each type. It is what each type is searching for in their lives. Now, interestingly enough, it often serves as a primary motivator for behavior and helps shed light on why we do what we do. Now, the core fear associated with each number, it represents the deep-seated anxiety or concern that drives the thoughts and the feelings and behaviors of each of the Enneagram type. It is the underlying fear that kind of shapes our worldview and motivates your actions, often unconsciously. Now, each Enneagram number also has a virtue and a vice. And the virtue and vice that are associated with each Enneagram type, they play significant roles in leadership development by giving you insights into both the strengths and the potential pitfalls of your type. And the virtue, it represents that highest potential or the positive quality associated with each type. It's the positive attribute that individuals of that type can cultivate to counteract their core fear or their vice. Now, on the other hand, the vice represents the primary negative tendency associated with each type. It is the maladaptive response that each type may exhibit under stress or when their core fear is triggered. And in leadership development, we need to be aware of both our virtue and our vice so that we can use our virtue to enhance our leadership presence and inspire trust and to foster collaboration. We also need to understand our vice so that we can identify potential blind spots and cultivate healthier ways of coping with stress and conflict. Okay, here's what you've been waiting for. Let's take a tour of the 9 Enneagram numbers. Now, when I teach the Enneagram, I always start at the top of the Enneagram in the gut or the anger triad with Enneagram 8s. And the type 8s are the start of the gut triad. And so that's how we will do this in this episode too. All right, type 8s are called the challenger or the protector. And 8s are assertive, they are confident, they are protective, and their basic desire is to protect themselves and others and to be strong and independent and in control of their own lives. So they value strength and autonomy and control, and they are not afraid to confront challenges or injustices. Now, 8s want to be in control of their own lives and masters of their own destiny. So they need autonomy and respect, and they value honesty and directness in their interactions. And they fear being controlled or feeling vulnerable or being betrayed. Now, eights worry about being taken advantage of or being seen as weak. So they are also wary of being manipulated, and they hate feeling powerless. So they have the virtue of innocence and the vice of lust or excess. And the message that eights need to hear is, you will not be betrayed. Okay, type nines are called the peacemaker or the mediator. And nines are just so easygoing, they're agreeable and harmonious. And their basic desire is to have peace and harmony and connection and to avoid conflict and tension. Now, nines value unity and they try to maintain stability in their relationships and their environment. So, nines want inner and outer peace and they want harmony and they want acceptance. So, they try to avoid tension or conflict, and they often will prioritize the needs and desires of others over their own needs and desires. And so they fear conflict and they fear loss or separation. So nines worry about disruption of their inner and outer peace, and they fear being overlooked or disregarded. And they have the virtue of right action and the vice of sloth. And the message that nines need to hear is, your presence matters. Okay, type ones are called the reformer or the perfectionist, but a lot of ones I know really don't like that title of perfectionist. But ones are, they are principled and they're purposeful and they are organized and they strive for perfection or excellence. And their basic desire is to be good and virtuous and ethical and to live with integrity. So they have a strong sense of right and wrong, and they are driven by a desire to improve themselves and the world around them. So ones need to be good and moral and ethical. And so they are searching for integrity and excellence and just a sense of purpose in everything that they do. And they fear being corrupt or evil or defective. So ones worry about making mistakes or being seen as imperfect. And so they have the virtue of serenity or inner peace and the vice of anger or resentment. And the message that ones need to hear is, you are good. Okay, type twos. Twos are called the helper or giver. And twos are caring and nurturing, and they are deeply empathetic. And their basic desire is to be loved and wanted and to feel appreciated for who they are and for their acts of kindness. So they thrive on helping and supporting others. And they often put the needs of others before their own. So they are looking for connection and validation through their acts of service and generosity. And they fear being unloved or unwanted or unworthy of love. And twos worry about being rejected or abandoned if they don't fulfill other people's needs. So twos have the virtue of humility and the vice of pride. And the message that twos need to hear is, you are loved for who you are, not for what you do. Type threes are called the achiever or the performer. And threes are ambitious and driven and success-oriented. And their basic desire is to feel valuable and successful and worthy of admiration and to be seen as competent. Now, they are highly motivated to achieve their goals and to excel at whatever they are doing. So, threes often look for validation and approval from others, and they are afraid of failure and feeling worthless or being seen as incompetent. Now, threes worry about not living up to expectations or losing their sense of identity without their achievements and accomplishments. And threes have the virtue of authenticity and the vice of deceit. And the message that threes need to hear is you are loved and valued for simply being you. All right, type fours are called the individualist or the romantic. And fours are creative and introspective, and they are deeply emotional. And their basic desire is to find their unique identity and significance and to express themselves authentically. And they have a rich inner world, and they are drawn to beauty and authenticity and self-expression. So fours want to be unique and special and authentic. And so they look for depth and meaning in their experiences and relationships. And they fear being ordinary or lacking identity. So fours worry about being misunderstood or unnoticed, and they fear being emotionally empty or insignificant. And they have the virtue of equanimity, which means evenness of emotions, and the vice of envy. And the message that fours need to hear is you are seen and loved for exactly who you are. Type fives are called the investigator or the observer. And fives are analytical and they are insightful and independent thinkers. And their basic desire is to be competent and capable and knowledgeable. And they need to preserve their energy and their resources. So fives love knowledge and they are true masters of the things that they are interested in. So they will often withdraw to just observe and analyze the world around them. And fives need to be seen as self-sufficient and to have adequate resources. So they need lots of privacy and autonomy and space to pursue their intellectual pursuits. So they fear being helpless or incompetent or overwhelmed by the demands of the world. So fives worry about having their resources depleted. And they have the virtue of non-attachment and the vice of avarice or stinginess. And the message that fives need to hear is your needs are not a problem. All right, sixes are called the loyalist or the skeptic. And sixes are loyal and responsible, and they are vigilant. And their basic desire is to feel secure and supported and guided and to trust themselves and their environment. So sixes value security and they value guidance and support from trusted authorities. And they are prone to anxiety and they tend to anticipate and prepare for potential threats and possible worst case scenarios. So sixes want to feel safe so that they can look for reassurance and stability in their relationships and their environment. And they fear abandonment or betrayal or just being without support. So sixes worry about uncertainty and danger. And so they are afraid of making decisions that could lead to negative outcomes. So sixes have the virtue of courage and the vice of fear. And the message that sixes need to hear is you are safe and supported. All right, type sevens, you've waited a long time for this. So sevens are called the enthusiast or the visionary. And sevens are optimistic, and they are adventurous and spontaneous. And their basic desire is to be happy and satisfied and free and to avoid pain and limitations. Now, sevens are pleasure seeking, and they enjoy exploring new experiences and exploring new ideas and possibilities. And so they look for excitement and variety and stimulation to avoid feeling bored or uncomfortable. So they also have a fear of being deprived or limited or trapped in negative emotions or negative situations. So sevens worry about missing out. So FOMO is a real thing to sevens. So they fear missing out on opportunities and experiencing pain and suffering. So they have the virtue of sobriety or inner stillness and the vice of gluttony. And the message that sevens need to hear is, you will be taken care of. Okay, that was a whirlwind tour of the 9 numbers. It's obviously just an introduction. And in future episodes, we will look at wings and stances and triads and stress and security and subtypes and much more. But in the meantime, where can you get more information on the Enneagram if you want to go a little bit deeper? So I've asked my research assistant, Percy, the I'm in penguin, to look for some additional resources for you. Percy, what did you find? Haha, thank you, Percy. I see you've been in my library. Percy has been to my library. So I have several resources here to recommend for you. And to begin with, I think one of my favorite books is The Road Back to You by Ian Cron and Suzanne Stabile. So this is a really great place to begin. Suzanne also wrote 2 other books, The Path Between Us, which looks at Enneagram and relationships, and The Journey Towards Wholeness. Both are fantastic resources. Now let's move on to the works by Beatrice Chestnut, and she has abundant, robust research. So the first one I recommend is The Complete Enneagram, so 27 Paths to Greater Knowledge, and this is by Beatrice Chestnut. And the other one that is a fantastic resource for leaders is The 9 Types of Leadership, Mastering the Art of People in the 21st Century Workplace. And then another resource I recommend, anything written by Ginger Lapid-Bogda. She is fantastic. And this is a resource that I use when I'm coaching. So bringing out the best in yourself at work. And it's also really valuable if you are a leader, if you're a supervisor, and you are coaching someone and you want to know just a little bit more. What questions should I ask? How might they respond? How could I give them better feedback? This is a really great resource. Now, I should have sent Percy to my husband's office to raid his library because I think he has 2 of my favorite books in his office. I also recommend Rizzo and Hudson's The Wisdom of the Enneagram and Rohr and Ebert's book on the Enneagram from a Christian perspective. And I'll list all of these resources in the show notes. Okay, well, there you have it. That is an introduction to the Enneagram, and this is the first of many episodes that we will do on the Enneagram. And in the future, we will unpack each number more thoroughly, and I'll share how you can grow and become more transformed in your number, as well as how you can appreciate the gifts of each number that they bring to the world, and how you can work more collaboratively with each number. Thank you for joining me in this conversation. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a dose of creativity and inspiration. So until next time, keep saying I'm in to creativity, bold thinking, and transformational growth and meaningful conversations. May you be wildly creative in your life and leadership. I'll see you soon.